Welcome to the Manifestation Lab. This is your host, Kelly Howe. From the grounded science to the mystical and unseen, we're investigating this big experiment we call life and finding what really works when it comes to manifesting a life that sets your heart and your soul on fire. Welcome to the lab. So welcome back, everybody, to the Manifestation Lab. And before I forget, this is my first public announcement that I am going to be rebranding the podcast and also doing a rebrand on my business. So be on the lookout for that. I'm not sure exactly how long it's going to take me to bring all that together, but the year of the wood snake, and I am definitely feeling that need to shed and become new again. So if you're doing that, you're not alone. And I'm really excited. I haven't landed for sure on a name yet. I've got a couple I'm tossing around, but if it shifts from the Manifestation Lab to something else, you'll know that it's still me and we're still here. It's just a rebrand, fresh and new. And welcome back, Marci. We've got Marci with Starlight Astrology again. Your episode was really, really popular. People loved it. I think it was really helpful. We talked about so much. And I did want to say that when I do podcasts with people, I kind of generally remember a little bit of what we talked about, but I kind of go into a different place with it. And so I don't remember sometimes. So if I ask some of the same questions, we're just going to have to trust that Spirit wants us to talk about that again. And because I do think that if things come up again, it's for a reason and we should just trust that. So welcome back. I'm really excited to get into our next conversation.
Excellent. Thank you for having me. Yes, I too received really great positive feedback on the conversation. So happy to be here. Thank you for having me back.
Yes. And thank you for being patient with me. I was sick last week and needed to reschedule the podcast. And I could have pushed through, but I was still having weird little coughing spasms and sneezes. And I was like, you know what, this is just not worth it. So I appreciate you being flexible with me. So here we are again. And I would love to just launch into, we're in January, it's winter time. We talked about the energy of winter a lot in the last one, if I remember correctly. So what do you see, what's going on right now that we could talk about? I know that we just had a big nodal shift. Mm-hmm. Is that right? And so why don't we start with that? And what does that nodal shift mean? And what's that going to look like for us?
Yes, excellent question. So yes, the nodal shift. The nodes, the moon nodes is what they're referred to. They are a lot less known within astrology, especially for common astrology, I would say. But we cannot underemphasize their importance in astrology overall. So I'll describe a little bit about what they are. So the moon's nodes they're not a planet. They're not actually a thing. They represent a point in space between the moon's orbit and where the moon's orbit and the ecliptic connect, etc. So based on, you have the nodes in your birth chart, and then there's the transiting nodes as well. So both of those things are very significant. And last week on January 11th, we had the nodes officially transiting to the signs of Pisces and Virgo. They're moving out of the signs of Libra and Aries and moving into the signs of Pisces and Virgo. So they're opposing, they move in pairs. There's a south node and a north node. They move in pairs, and again, they're moving out of those two and moving into Pisces and Virgo. Now, what does that mean? How does that impact us? Essentially, what that means is a new area of our life is now going to be ripe for change. It's going to be representing a bigger shift in terms of, or areas of our life that are up for evaluation, if you will, or are up for shifting. It just depends on where those particular signs fall into your birth chart in terms of how that's going to impact you specifically. But it is very exciting from an astrological perspective because it just means a different area is up for change. And we oftentimes, when we talk about the eclipses, for example, you've heard about, a solar eclipse, a lunar eclipse, those are happening because those full moons and those new moons are happening in a specified distance next to those nodes. So again, those eclipses bring about a lot of change because those nodes are involved.
Okay.
So it's getting a little technical.
Yeah, no, that's okay. So let's talk about what is the North Node and what, just in general, what does the North Node represent? What does that bring into our energy?
Mm-hmm. So the North Node it's also referred to as the dragon head, the head of the dragon, and the South Node is also referred to as the dragon's tail. And the North Node represents, what are we growing into? What are the areas and what are the things that we need to continue to lean into in order to get closer to our overall soul's purpose? To contrast that, the South Node represents kind of it's kind of the dragon's tail. It's kind of like what I refer to as almost like a sweeper. And in the birth chart, it represents areas of comfort. But areas in comfort in terms of this is kind of sometimes our default, sometimes, especially under stress or when we're not in a comfortable situation, we revert back to the qualities and the attributes of our South Node because that's kind of our comfort level. And if we get into previous lifetimes and, how that all comes together from an astrology perspective, we can have a lot of conversations around that. But it really speaks to some of the gifts that we have inherited, but also some areas that we need to let go of in order to move forward in our soul's evolution. So we kind of need to let go of some of those attributes in order to move forward. The North Node shows us where we need to go. The South Node shows us what we need to let go of.
Okay, beautiful. So we have just moved North Node into Pisces and South Node into Virgo. So can you go more specifically into what that looks like? Is this a collective shift? Is this going to hit harder for people that actually have Pisces prevalent in their chart? Talk to us about that.
Yeah. Yeah. So what I just described is really speaking to the nodal shift as it relates to your birth chart. In general, as we're here in our lifetime and we're moving through life, the North Node represents where we're moving towards. The South Node represents what do we need to let go of. Now, when we talk about the nodes in terms of the transiting nodes, so that's what we were starting off the conversation, is the fact that the transiting nodes, the ones that are moving in real time, they just shifted to Pisces and Virgo. So what that means as a collective, when we think about Pisces, that's really a bigger focus on spirituality, compassion, having things more fluid in terms of being more flexible and kind of embracing the world around us in a different light, for example.
Very intuitive, right?
Yes, exactly. Very intuitive. Those are just a little bit of kind of Pisces-like themes that are coming up. And so the North Node at a collective level is asking us to lean into more of those Pisces type themes. On the other hand, the South Node is now transiting through Virgo. South Node, again, is a point of release. It's a point of letting go. So it's asking us, what about the Virgo qualities do we need to let go of? Now, Virgo can be known to be very analytical, very persistent, very detail-oriented, a perfectionist, are just a few words. So, and we can get more specific into birth charts and like where this is showing up for you more at a more granular level. But it's kind of like what I've noticed, a big sweeper that comes through a particular area of your life, and sometimes it's uncomfortable. But it's like sweeping up all of this stuff and forcing us to look at it.
Yeah.
So if you do have big placements in Virgo and Pisces, like you in particular, you have a lot of Virgo placements. It can definitely be a time period that a lot of areas of your life are going to be up for change.
Yeah. So rebranding the podcast.
Yes.
Rebranding
I love that.
business,
when I heard that, I was like,
life.
spot. Yeah, that is spot on because we get our first eclipse, our lunar eclipse in Virgo on March 14th. So the timing is quite beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, you just can't make this stuff up. It's why I feel like this is so incredibly empowering to make sense of ourselves and be able to see that reflected inward and outward and just be able to be like, okay, wow, I'm not crazy. This is really happening. And to be able to kind of look into the past and go, oh, that's why that happened. That's why I felt like this. And then also into the future and to know you might be moving into things, that might be more challenging or that might be a great time to launch something or to really take advantage of the energy of something. I think it's just so empowering. So that does bring me to the next question I have, the thing I want to talk about. And that is going back to, I am a Virgo rising and I do have a lot of Virgo placements. So I figured that meant that this dragon tail sweeping was going to be an intense, I would imagine the way I'm seeing it is like, do we get to hold on to the gifts, but it's kind of sweeping away the shadow qualities and
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I'm glad you said that, because when we talk about letting go of those tendencies that are, maybe holding us back, our comfort zone tendencies, we also have to remember there is some gold in that. So take those nuggets with you, but the things that are no longer supporting you, that are no longer that we need to let go, those are the things that we need to let go. So it's not leave everything, leave all of your Piscean qualities behind, per se, in the case of your birth chart. There are some really, really special gifts with that too. So take those with you on your journey through life, but be cognizant that there's some of those shadow sides, we'll say, of the Pisces is what we need to let go of.
Well, I definitely have that Virgo perfectionist quality. It doesn't show up in every aspect of my life. Like, you could walk into my house and some people will be shocked at some of the messes that are around, and I'm very comfortable with that. It's just who I am. Sometimes things are very tidy and sometimes it's more of a mess. And especially when I'm in my creative mad genius zone, it's like there's just papers everywhere. It's crazy. I mean, it's like I have a hard time being grounded in reality and caring if things are organized. However, when it comes to my business and the decisions that I make in my business, I take that so seriously to a fault sometimes. And that perfectionism can be completely paralyzing and debilitating to the point where at least I know that where this tendency is coming from. But I'm actually really looking forward to sweeping some of that perfectionism out of the way. And I feel like I'm already feeling it. I don't know. I don't know if that, if that tracks or if it's too soon or what, but I feel more like I give zero fucks about what people think, like I feel more of that organically down in my core. Like I just can't live my life in my business, which I have such high aspirations for and have this vision of reaching so many people. And this perfectionism just is strangling me sometimes. So I don't know. Do you have any Virgo in your chart? Does that resonate for you at all?
Oh, 100%. I also have I have a lot of Virgo in my chart too. So I have my moon in Virgo. I have my Saturn in Virgo. I have my North Node in Virgo, similar to you. So this is also this time frame, and it's for you and for me, is especially important. It's especially heightened because it's referred to as our reverse nodal return. Oh. So when the nodes are transiting and they come back to the area that they were when you were born, and the opposite. So we have our North Node in Virgo. So the South Node's there. So it's called a reverse nodal return. Those just represent time frames that are typically even more magnified in terms of change.
Okay.
In terms of shifting, if you will. So it's heightened. It's a heightened area for us. So
I feel that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Definitely. We didn't really plan on talking about this, but I would love if you would take a second to differentiate between, we all know our sun sign, or most people know their sun sign. How would you differentiate between the sun sign, the rising sign, and the North Node?
And the North Node. Okay. Yeah. So your sun sign and your North Node there's a lot of overlap, in my opinion. There's a lot of ways you can interpret both of them, that both of them ultimately lead you to your life purpose in a very general term. Your sun sign represents kind of the core essence of who you are, as well as who you are growing into. So there's certainly some clients I've worked with where I talk about their sun sign, and for a long time, they will tell me, especially when I was younger, it was harder for me to accept these qualities of my sun sign, which is very common and very true, that this is something you are growing into to accept as part of yourself. It also represents kind of your life force, just your core being is really your sun sign, and how you go about life, and some of the more important attributes about you and how you connect with others. Your rising sign, on the other hand, is what I refer to who you are when you walk into a room. So I don't like to say it's a mask, because a mask will kind of can initiate or can give up feelings of fake or not real. So I don't want to say it's a mask, but it is ultimately kind of how you show up in the world. It's how you approach your life on a regular basis. So, who are you, and what is that doorway that you are walking in in order to fulfill your greater purpose. That's kind of your rising sign. So for you as a Virgo rising, so while it's so important to you from your sun sign's Aquarius, it's so important for you to kind of stand out and be your own person amongst the collective. It's important to you to connect with the collective on a regular basis, or to feel like you are part of something bigger, to have and honor your unique self and your unique self as it stands out from a crowd, for example. All of that can be very important to you, but how you go about it from a Virgo perspective, being very meticulous about your business, being very careful about how you approach different initiatives. But also Virgos tend to represent themselves as very grounded, very stable. And especially for you with all the planets you have in Virgo, you can certainly present yourself as being kind of that grounding, stable force, which is probably why you are so successful with your clients, because they feel that coming from you in terms of how you approach it. So that's kind of how both those things work together, your sun and your rising sign.
That completely makes sense.
They complement each other in that way. Your North Node represents something a little bit deeper. So your North Node represents, what are you here to evolve into? What are you here, and what is your purpose for being here? What are you growing into? What do you need to become more comfortable with as you continue through this lifetime? So it can be tricky to kind of distinguish between North Node and your sun, but your sun also represents what lights you up. Your sun is definitely going to feel a lot more comfortable, because the North Node is kind of asking you to step outside your comfort zone and to lean into the qualities and the attributes in a specific area of your life that maybe you didn't always feel comfortable with, because that's the path to your overall evolution. And, it can kind of sound woo-woo-y if we, talking about the soul's evolution and all of that.
Not to me.
So I often, I know I'm in good company here, but to some of my clients, they might stop me and say, wait a minute, I'm just trying to make it to Friday. Can we?
Right. Well, that's fair.
What do you mean soul's evolution? And the reason it's important for today, and it's important for our understanding today, is leaning into that soul's evolution. That's what brings us happiness. That's what brings us fulfillment. That's what brings us contentment and self-confidence. Because we're starting to live in alignment with our purpose on earth. So that's how it's kind of all connected. And that's why it's important to know it and do it, and to try to get yourself in those uncomfortable places where this is directing you, because that's the universe telling you, here's where you need to grow. And here's where the benefits are. Here's the key to fulfillment. Here's the path to fulfillment. Now, it doesn't mean you're going to wake up on Sunday with a bag of money on your front porch by following your soul's purpose. But it is providing you those breadcrumbs to get closer to the level of fulfillment and joy and happiness throughout your life. So
my North Node is Leo. Is the North Node always opposite your sun sign? Because I'm an Aquarius and Leo is 6 months later. Is it always directly opposite?
No. So your North Node is actually Virgo as well.
Oh,
so
is it? I thought it was.
Yeah, you're 0 degrees. Yeah, it's right on the cusp, to be fair. But yes, it is in Virgo as well. So you are also going to go through your reverse nodal return. It's not going to be until later, not for another year or so when it's exact, I should say. But this is a very important time frame for you. So, but no, to answer your question, the nodes can be anywhere within your chart, and it's not at all correlated to the sun.
Okay. Does that show up in different systems when you put your data in? Because I'm almost positive in some it shows up as Leo.
Yes, because depending on the house system. So again, this is getting a little bit technical, but when we think about the universe and how do we divide up the universe? That's kind of the ultimate question, is how do you divide up the universe? Astrologers don't always agree on exactly how are we going to divide up that universe. So there's different house systems, and that might be playing into it. or double check the time, your time of birth, to make sure that was entered correctly. But that should be at 0 degrees Virgo.
Sounds like it's close
Um,
enough that maybe I need to just assume that I think of Virgo and Leo sort of as my north node.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, definitely take a look at that. But usually that's what it is. It's called a difference in house systems.
Yeah.
It's very possible the house system, I know when you look online, a lot of the online web tools will default to Placidus, which can show differences. And so it could get very confusing in terms of where is this node actually falling,
Okay.
etc. So
Yeah, that makes sense. So let's move on to talking about it feels like this year has a lot of big shifts in it with the nodal shift. And then I know later in the year, we have several of these outer planets shifting signs, which I understand is another major shift, along with this Pluto that just entered Aquarius, and we just entered the age of Aquarius. Like there's just so much happening all at once. So let's start with what's going on with these outer planets and what can we expect with that?
yeah, great question. Yeah, this 2025 is an exciting year from an astrological perspective because it is rare that we have all of these outer planets and the nodes all shifting signs at the same time. So what does that mean in kind of, more granular terms? So number one, it means that there's going to be a shift. And for some of us, that is going to be palatable. Now, the reality is some of these things may not happen until 2026 when these planets that are shifting, because they shift and then they move back in their retrograde cycle, then they move back. A lot of the planets are not going to be firmly in these new signs until 2026. So it's very possible we're not going to feel or see the impacts of these changes until then. But up until then, in 2025, we are getting what we call a preview of what's to come in 2026. So these are all shifts that are happening from a collective level. Yes, we might feel some of it, probably not as dramatic. But when we look back at this time period in a year or so from now, it wouldn't surprise me if we kind of like, oh yeah, I do remember. I did start to feel things moving, shaking, and all those types of things. So when we talk about the outer planets moving, what are those? So the outer planets are Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and then Pluto, as you mentioned. Jupiter, I'll start with Jupiter. To give a little bit of background about Jupiter in itself and how it plays a role in the overall astrology, Jupiter is the biggest planet of our solar system. It takes 12 years for a full orbit, which means it spends about 1 year per sign, 1 year in a sign at a time, not to get confusing there. Jupiter represents expansion, growth, abundance. It can show like where you have natural gifts in your birth chart, but overall it's considered a positive planet because it is associated with those types of things. It will be shifting from Gemini to Cancer on June 9th. So what does that mean? Jupiter in Cancer, it's considered exalted, which means it does really well. It can really shine in Cancer. It can really do its thing. One of the things that's really important about right now is we are currently in what we call, I talked about this before, but the Mars retrograde that's happening in Cancer. And depending on where Cancer is in your birth chart, this is not a comfortable feeling. There's a lot of people I'm hearing that are like, what is going on? It just feels frustrating and stressful. And we just had a new moon a full moon in Cancer on Monday, right next to this Mars retrograde, and it has been messy, to say the least. So Mars is kind of shaking things up a little bit in that Cancer rule thing, and it's not always an easy time. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's not an easy time necessarily. Jupiter is making its way into Cancer in June, and it's like spring. It's like sprinkles. It's like bringing joy back to this particular area of our life. So it's going to be a nice welcome change in June when we have Jupiter now coming into the sign that Mars will have left. Mars can wreak havoc sometimes. So it'll be like the sun is finally shining in this particular area.
This is in
but
June.
having Jupiter in Cancer, we can really see, or we can really expect a bigger focus on Cancer-like themes. So that's family, that's your home, bringing abundance to those that need nurturing, communities that might need nurturing, some healing that might be happening. Again, Jupiter can expand and bring abundance to those areas of our life for Cancer. So that's Jupiter.
I was literally just telling my little sister, we were just on the phone before we jumped on our call, and I was just telling her she met a new healer friend in Colorado, and I said, you know what, Meg, this is the time for you. You know, if you want to start a healing business, I said, literally everybody in 2025 and beyond is going to need a healer. Like, I think this is the year when energy healing and that kind of thing, like people are waking up and realize that you can't take a pill for everything. It's not going to fix everything. It works for some things. I take thyroid medicine, you know what I mean? Like
Yes.
it's not, I don't throw that out, but people are really waking up and realizing that they need to do healing in a different way. So as you were describing Jupiter and Cancer, I'm like, maybe that's the energy that I'm sensing, but it just feels like, it does feel like in the middle of the year, there's going to be a lot of people that are like, I need to try this Reiki thing, or, you know, some kind of energy healing, even if they've never stepped into that before. So that's just really, it's really interesting. We just talked about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think that is also a great manifestation of all the shifting we are going to see, is shifting in mindsets, shifting in the approach of things. You know, I think that it's all up for that evaluation. So I'm excited for that for sure.
I am too. Okay. And what about Saturn? Were you going to move on to
And
that?
then we have Saturn. Yes, we have Saturn, which is right after Jupiter. So Saturn, it takes 29 and a half years to make a full orbit. So it is in one sign for a longer time period, about 2.5 years. Saturn, visually is known for its rings. And Saturn is known for things like structure, creating something that stands the test of time. It's known for discernment, self-sufficiency, discipline, reliance, but also tests from the universe, limitations. My favorite words to describe Saturn are delay but not deny. So it's not about immediate benefit. Jupiter is more about immediate benefit. It's going to bring you lessons, but bring you lessons that are a tad bit easier, or abundance. Saturn's the opposite. Saturn's like, I'm going to test your limits a little bit, but you're going to walk away with some really great lessons. Responsibility, boundaries, those are all very Saturn things. Now, Saturn is currently in Pisces, which it's going to be shifting out of Pisces into Aries on May 24th of this year. So it's going to be into Aries. It's going to move back into Pisces for a little bit, and then back into Aries in September, back out of Aries, and then fully into Aries by February of next year. So Saturn in Pisces is a little bit more of a frustrating and kind of difficult area. Just to kind of talk about where we're coming from to where we're going to. Saturn in Pisces, Pisces, again, it's all about flexibility, compassion, loose boundaries. And, when you think about all the things I just said about Saturn, you might kind of already start to see that may not be a great fit. So it's very possible that this area of life, depending on where Pisces is in your chart or just in general, has felt very frustrating, because having boundaries and kind of strict schedules and forcing ourselves to be disciplined about a particular area that Pisces rules can feel really challenging. It really can. So coming from that to Aries, Aries is a very different vibe from Pisces. So Aries is all about ambition, courage, independence, being a self-starter, being a pioneer, and sometimes not thinking about consequences as much, because we're all about the now, like living in the now and making those bold moves today. So it'll definitely be a different shift there. Having Saturn there is going to say yes to all those things, except let's be sure that we're thinking about the long term of all those things as Saturn shifts there, because Saturn's for the long game. So it could also bring up some levels of frustration with Saturn, just because it's going to say, okay, I see those long-term goals, or I see what you want to do here, but wait, do we have the right structures in place to make this last long, for the long game? Like there might be some frustrations that we'll feel in terms of getting things started and then getting things stopped, or having things stopped and forcing ourselves to relook at whatever it is that we're doing. And the ultimate lesson here is, let's be sure that we have the right structure and stability in place for all these great initiatives before we put them forward.
So it doesn't burn out. So it doesn't become out of control and just totally burn up.
Yeah. Yeah. But again, it's going to be a shift, and it's going to be a different area. So that's Saturn.
Okay.
The last time, if you're really curious about this, the last time Saturn was in Aries was in 1996. So if you think back at your life, and those of us that are old enough to remember 1996, but if you think back to your life, and maybe this was a bigger time period for you, so you can kind of think of those themes and see if they repeat, or similar type of themes repeat themselves.
Yeah, interesting. So would the Saturn in, what are we in? Pisces.
Pisces.
Would that have been maybe a year and a half before, like more like 14, 15? Okay.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's my age at that time. I'm aging myself. So 14, 15 would have been my last Saturn in Pisces. I think that, I think I can see some overlapping themes. And definitely around 16, I would say, like, what I'm seeing when you're describing in my mind, what I'm seeing is literally like giving structure to that like big flamey energy that wants to just like go, and I think it was around 16 when I was kind of tired of my own like victim mindset and had this big burst of energy, like, I'm going to do me. And I think that, like, looking back on it, I can see how that kind of did burn a little bit, and how I was learning to give it structure and to learn how to be that person, shifting out of, I mean, I would, I know it was right around that age, but I was just like, I'm done with this, I'm tired of my own crap.
Yeah, I absolutely love that example, because not only is it a great example of Saturn moving into Aries, but that victim mindset is it's kind of a shadow side of Pisces. And remember, your South Node is in Pisces. So that was exactly illuminating something for you that you needed to let go of. Because again, that can be our tendency. That's our kind of fallback, that we can end up in that victim mindset. And, there might have been some situations that kind of highlighted that to you, and you were able to see that and identify that and say, I need to let go of this, because that's exactly it. That is leading you away from your purpose. So you need to let it go in order to move forward.
Remember distinctly that feeling of like, I'm not going to let my life be determined by other people's vision of me or decisions about me. Like, I'm making my life. I'm doing it, so yeah. That's
I love that. That's such a great example. That is such a great example.
I love it.
Good.
Saturn. Okay. So is it Uranus that's next?
Yes. So we have Uranus next. So Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. And we talked a lot about Uranus last time, but Uranus in Neptune and Pluto, they're called transcendental planets. Again, they are the very outer, they oftentimes describe a generation because they are very slow moving. So Uranus, again, Saturn makes an orbit 29 and a half years to make its full way around our birth charts, or around our system here. Uranus spends 84 years to make a full orbit around our birth chart. So it stays in a sign for anywhere between 7 and 8 years. Now, Uranus is known for originality, technical advancements, freedom, the urge to rebel, to push beyond our limits. Very much an out with the old, in with the new type of mentality. It's attuned to the future, insight, but can also bring sudden changes as well as unpredictability. So, what some of the shadow sides is, with some of those sudden changes and unpredictability, it can also cause chaos, unwanted change, of course, destructive, unresponsible, inflexible. Those are some of the shadow sides of Uranus. Now, again, when some of these outer planets are changing signs, it is a big deal because they do spend so much time in one particular sign. Uranus has been in the sign of Taurus since 2018, and it will be moving to the sign of Gemini on July 7th of this year. It's going to then retrograde back to Taurus, and then it's going to move back to Gemini on November 7th, and then back again. And then it will be fully into Gemini on April in 2026. Now, Uranus in Taurus is not a very comfortable place for Uranus. So it's very possible that things have not felt comfy. Now, if you know any Taurus friends, people that have their sun sign in Taurus, and if you know them well enough to know their rising sign or their moon sign, they can probably relate to this as well. But Tauruses in general do not like change. They like stability. They like to understand what is our plan and having a strong bedrock in terms of, what's keeping things stable, having that strong foundation underneath them. Having Uranus going through their sign, which again, Uranus is all about that unpredictability, having, some of that change coming on from here or there. So having all of that happen there's probably a few Tauruses in your life that are like, enough.
I think of all the
I can't handle
signs,
this.
oddly, I think I probably am close with the fewest Taurians. Is that how you say it? Is it Taurian? Taurian? I don't have a lot of Taurus friends for some reason, or family members, oddly.
Yeah.
I mean, I have
That's
some,
interesting.
but not very many. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you speak to them, they could probably point to a few examples in the last 7 or 8 years where there was some pretty dramatic change or some pretty dramatic shakeup that happened to them in their life or whatever. But again, it's not really a comfortable place for Uranus because it's all about this, but it may have felt kind of weighed down by Taurus. So having it move into Gemini is a much more comfortable place for Uranus. So I think we're going to see a lot more of that Uranus type of activity happening. Now, Gemini is all about learning as much as possible in the shortest amount of time. Gemini loves to create digestible content that you can then reach a lot of people with. And then teaching that whatever information was just learned, being able to teach people that information. Gemini is also about curiosity, being friendly, kind of being that social butterfly of our solar system. So having Uranus there, it's a little bit more of what we'll call a comfortable position for that. So we can probably already start to see some of that, but maybe that's going to bring us bigger advancements in how we receive information. We could think about it as, remember back in the 90s, it was like the information superhighway. This might represent information superhighway 2.0, for example, because having Uranus there to kind of help stir up some of those Gemini themes, I think could be really, really interesting, as well as technology, because Uranus is known for technology. So perhaps how are we going to see more technological advancements in terms of how we create information and content and how we receive it as well?
Okay, so there's something that comes to mind, and I'm not sure if you have seen this or heard about this, but Google just created a quantum computer. Have you heard about this?
No, I haven't.
This is crazy, and I wish I had it pulled up to actually read what it says, but I'm going to summarize, and I'm not going to do a very good job. But Google came out with a public statement, like in the last month, that said, "Hey, we created this quantum computer, and it computes so quickly that the only possibility is that it's pulling information from other realms." Like from other universes. It says that in the public statement. So go read it because it is fascinating. So all I can imagine is AI is already so incredibly progressive. And I mean, it blows my mind. It does scare me, but mostly I'm excited about it, to be honest with you, because I really, I think that it can do a lot of really good for our world. And I mean, for example, there's a guy I'm listening to who is working on using AI to create like a functional medicine doctor type of situation where you can run your data through these things, and then you'll still talk to a practitioner, but it's gonna be able to look at it from a functional medicine perspective. And I just think that that is one of the places where this is going to do good in the world, to be able to this technology doing that. But if you add a quantum computer to AI, I don't even know what that's going to look like. Like it's going to be crazy.
Exactly. I think that's an awesome example of exactly how this will probably manifest for us as a collective. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. So yeah, that's probably the start of it right there.
Isn't that crazy? I mean, it sounds very woo-woo, but that was in the Google statement. I mean, it's right there. In fact, I was blown away by it, but it came across my son's TikTok or Instagram or something
Yeah.
too. And so I can't remember which of us started talking about it, but we were both like, "Are you freaking kidding me that was actually in the statement? Like, there's no way it could be coming from this universe, basically." And it was like,
Yeah.
wow,
Yeah.
times are changing
Yeah.
really quickly. And
Yes.
I like to remind my family, I'm like, you guys have been calling me crazy for years, and I'm officially done. Like, look what this Google statement says. Like, no more. You can't call me crazy anymore. Like, the government's admitting that aliens are here. I've been saying that forever. You know, they've said that there's an alien base in the ocean. I'm like, duh, been saying that forever. You can't call me crazy anymore. So, yeah, I love it. I
I
think it's
love that.
really exciting, and also obviously an air of caution as far as like, what's that going to look like?
Exactly. As with anything, as with
Mhm.
anything. But yeah, again, this kind of goes back to what we were talking about the year of 2025 and the shifts we're going to see. I mean, all of these planets are shifting. And with Uranus moving into Gemini, quick, quick moving and being ready, like buckle our seatbelt because things are going to be moving fast. So, something to be aware of. And then we have Neptune. So Neptune has, okay, so Uranus had an orbit of 84 years. Neptune has an orbit of 165 years. Now, when we talked a little bit about Neptune last time, and I think I mentioned it takes 12 years. It's in a sign for 12 years. It's actually in a sign for 14 years before it moves out. So again, that's why these shifts are such a big deal, is because these planets stay in these signs for a long time. So when they move, it's
And
noteworthy.
the fact that they're all doing it at the same time, I think is, I mean, I can't even imagine how many thousands of years it's been since that cycle came back through at the exact same time.
Yeah, yeah, it doesn't happen often. That's why us astrologers are so excited for this year. So Neptune's a little bit tougher to get our head around because Neptune is about surrender. It's about spiritual awareness, inspiration, creativity, imagination, having deep compassion, heightened sensitivity, very empathetic, strong intuition. Definitely when we talked about woo woo, but that's really Neptune. But it's also so important. It's because it's the people that have strong Neptunian qualities that give us these visions for the future. A lot of people who work in the entertainment industry, for example, have very strong Neptunian type qualities in their charts. Like they have an ability to see how something could be. Or, you think about some of the big creations like Star Wars, for example, like who could have put that together? So it takes a dreamer, it takes a visionary to be able to pull that kind of stuff together. That's where I see like the best examples of how Neptune can play out in real life. But
Mhm.
it can also represent areas of our life or just areas in general that we don't see as clearly. That sometimes we approach that particular area of our life with rose-colored glasses, if you will. So it's helpful to know, to have a good friend or someone else you can trust to connect with you sometimes on, okay, what's really going on here? And just as a quick example, I did have a client who had Neptune in their chart, and it was in kind of the dating relationship area of their chart. And, she was telling me, oh, yeah, she had the toughest time when she was dating. She always had to go to a friend to say, this is what's happening, but what's really happening? Because it was so easy for her to get caught up in the fairy tale of
Mhm.
what the dating life should be, could be. So she had to really make sure she was grounding herself in the reality of that. So, anyway, just an example of how Neptune can kind of come to life and how it can play a part in your life. So, in terms of its transiting signs, it is also right now in Pisces. So, Saturn and Neptune are both in Pisces right now, and they are going to move to Aries. So, Neptune is also moving to Aries. It's going to move to Aries on March 30th, then, back out and then back in on October 22nd. And then finally, it's going to be in Aries full time in January of 26. Neptune loved being in Pisces. In modern rulership, Neptune rules Pisces. So it's like a natural fit. So even going back to some of the words I just described as Neptune, and we were talking about Pisces earlier too, you can see there's like that natural gel between the two. You may remember, like, or kind of think back too, if you think about 14 years ago, and maybe even more recently, there has definitely been an increase in spirituality type
Oh my gosh,
themes,
absolutely.
self-care,
Hmm.
talking about self-care, talking about emotional health and your mental health those are very common themes that if you think back, 15 years ago, we didn't really talk about any of that. Um, so those are some of the prevalent themes that we have seen with Neptune being in Pisces. Neptune in Aries. Now, this is a very different energy with Neptune being in Aries. So Aries is, again, when we're talking about Saturn, so that's all about an initiator, having ambition, having courage, taking the leap of faith, all of those kind of more masculine type of energies. Having Neptune there is like taking all of that and softening the edges to it. So to give you an example, the last time Neptune was in Aries was 1861 to 1874. Because again, it has such a long orbit. We obviously weren't around for that. But some notable things that happened during that time period, we had the Civil War, the abolition of slavery. So when you think about the Civil War, it was about fighting for equal rights of humans. So Neptune kind of softening the edges of society in that way. There was also the Geneva Conventions, which was all about bringing more humanitarian treatment during wartime. Again, kind of wartime being more of an Aries theme, Neptune being more of a humanity thing, and having those things come together. The book Great Expectations was published during this time period. And that book itself is such a perfect example of Neptune and Aries. It's about diving into the dreams of a particular individual and the realizations and the reality check that that individual goes through in terms of their own ambitions, their gains, their losses, and the expectation of society. So hopefully that kind of gives us an idea of how Neptune and Aries
I
can, that
hope,
energy that we can feel.
yeah, I really hope that this means that some of this turmoil in Gaza and
Mm,
in Ukraine, I mean, and all over, I hope that this means that there can be some kind of resolution and
yeah,
softening and, whew, you only pray that that's the case.
yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And that brings us to Pluto. So Pluto, it takes its orbit of 248 years. It changes signs every 12 to 31 years, depending on its orbit. It has an irregular orbit, so it varies in terms of its time it spends. The thing with Pluto is it's small but mighty.
Mhm.
Do not underestimate the power of Pluto. That is one thing I say to all my clients.
I had already written that down, tiny but mighty.
It is felt very deeply at a soul level. Now, Pluto is moving into Aquarius, and I mentioned this I say this because you were just mentioning the wartime kind of areas that are happening, and Pluto can definitely represent power to the people. The age of Aquarius, as you had mentioned too, and having it be an Aquarius can certainly highlight that. So the last time Pluto was in Aquarius was 1777 to 1797. And two big notable historical things that happened during that time was the American Revolution and the French Revolution. Again, two really big examples of power to the people and returning to power. So Pluto, in terms of what it stands for, is death and rebirth. And I don't mean it literally, I just mean what needs to die in order for something to thrive. Um, what needs to be let go to bring in the new, to bring in the light. It can also represent transformation, regeneration, healing, subconscious truths can also be revealed. Power, empowerment, and sometimes those truths are dark truths, but it's about bringing light to those dark truths. Excavating what was previously hidden, buried, or ignored. One of the things, what's interesting is in a few of the readings I've been doing with clients here recently, you know, Pluto just moved into Aquarius, as you mentioned, but it's kind of been teeter-tottering across Capricorn and Aquarius for the last year and a half or so. And as it continues to hit that really important 0 degree mark of Aquarius, I'm hearing so many people just say, depending on where this is happening in their chart, there's just an area of their life that they just cannot do that anymore. And I talked a little bit about that with the Uranus opposition last time. But it's also true in terms of, from a Pluto perspective too. It can kind of excavate some of these deeper things that were maybe living beneath the surface for a long time, but bringing it in and being like, no, I can't do that anymore. I've seen this with one client who is now going to have Pluto in a very prominent area of her chart that's really about how you express yourself. And she finally said, I'm not going to play that role anymore in her particular life. But I don't know if it was as a sister, a mother, whatever that was, but it was just like a hard no, I'm not doing that. Or in another client I was working with, this is actually taking place with her one-on-one partnerships. And she has gotten so into being more cognizant about her own boundaries and kind of throwing that gauntlet down to say, no, I am not making that compromise anymore. So it can be a really, really powerful stance. And it's in having this in Aquarius, it's, again, really focusing on the collective and shifting. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see a shift in power to the collective. So similar to the mentioned historically, the American, the French revolutions, a modern day take on that. I don't know what that is exactly or what that will be, but.
Well, I have an example that's already been happening. And, if it really depends on who people are, like what they pay attention to. I'm somebody who first learned of the corruption in the food industry and the pharmaceutical industry probably around like 2008 was really when I really had my eyes open to that. And let me first say, when you really start to see and understand some of the corruption, it is not a good place, because you go from, I'm saying this because a lot of people are going to be going through this year. It is not easy. There's cognitive dissonance. You have a belief that, oh, my government wouldn't let a company put carcinogens in my food. I believed that the government was protecting us in that way. And all that to say that I first had my eyes open to this, probably, like I said, around like 2008, maybe even a little bit before that. But I was dealing with my hormone balance stuff with my thyroid, and I was not having any relief with medicine and going the traditional Western medicine path. I just needed to get outside of that. So I started learning and reading about all this stuff. Just yesterday, or like in the last couple of days, the FDA banned that red food dye. I don't remember which one it is. Red number, blah, blah, blah.
Number 3.
Number 3. That has been a known carcinogen for 35 years. 35 years ago, they banned it in cosmetics because they knew it caused cancer and that was dangerous. But then they allowed it to be put in our food for another 30 plus years. I've heard 30 and 35 years. I'm not sure exactly which one it is, so don't quote me on that. But that came about because of the people, because we boycotted Kellogg's, and because we used our voices and we used our pockets and our money and said, I'm not buying that shit anymore. I'm not doing it. Right. So I think that is a perfect example of a power to the people, like putting our foot down and saying, no, this isn't going to work for us anymore. And using our voice and our influence in our pocketbook to actually bring that power back to us, which I think is so exciting. And I think this is literally the tip of the iceberg. And everything that you're talking about with these huge planetary shifts and the nodal shifts, I'm like, it is all supporting it. It's all right there. We can't help but shift.
Yeah. And it's so, I think your example is spot on. And it's also, and of course, as an astrologer, the timing of this announcement is also just incredible, because we have the sun approaching its conjunction with Pluto. I know this is getting very technical, very geeky, but the sun is coming into Pluto. It's going to meet up with Pluto on Sunday, when the start of Aquarius season. And so when you have like the sun or Mars or one of the personal planets meeting up with some of these outer planets that we just spoke about, you tend to see the impact of those themes that I just mentioned, where you tend to see a lot of that come together on those specific dates. So this example, I just saw it in the news this morning as well. this banning of the red number three, because the people were so vocal in saying, no, we do not accept this as an okay risk. And the timing of that is so incredible. And this potential TikTok ban, not ban.
But with the food, that's been something that just personally has been pissing me off for, 20 years. And to see that finally coming around is just like a huge celebration. And like I said, I can tell that we are just getting started. The fact that it had been banned, all these things that are in our food had been banned in Europe for years. And yet the US, they make, what is it, Fruit Loops, they make it differently for Europe and for Canada. And then they put all the trash in our food. I mean, it's just unacceptable.
And I think, but to that point, I think, especially as this is now getting banned, I think it's going to be really interesting to see what else comes to fruition or what else gets brought up. Because if we're successful with getting this really highlighted and the impacts and the change, what's going to follow?
Yeah. I feel the revolution energy. Like I feel it. I feel like we've been stuck for the last 5 years. And I think right now I feel the tides turning. I feel that like planetary shift. I'm like, hell yes, let's go. Like, let's freaking go and get this done. I'm so excited about it. And I'm sure that it's not all going to be easy, but I think it's worth celebrating the small things, the red number 3 getting out, I think is actually a pretty big one. So super exciting. Pluto, you said something about Pluto that sparked my attention and I lost it. So we'll come back to that if we need to.
Yeah. So Sunday is the start of Aquarius season. That's your season. So very exciting. So the sun is going to be entering into Aquarius, but Pluto's already there. So the sun's going to move into Pluto. Again, it tends to be an amplifier when the sun meets up with each of the outer planets. So again, it's just the timing of all of it is just very funny that this announcement on red number 3 is coming out today, within days of this happening. The alleged TikTok ban is potentially going to happen around that same day. It can really start to put a highlight on all of those Pluto and Aquarius themes that we mentioned, like power to the people.
Yeah. Okay. I remembered what I was going to ask. Yeah. I remembered what came to my mind. And that was, I know that we're having a huge planetary alignment on the 25th, where in the sky, these planets are going to line up and be all perfectly in a row. Is there anything that we should know about that? And is there an energy that we're going to feel or sense or that we should take advantage of or be wary of or anything like that with that?
Truthfully, I think that's more of an astronomical situation, like in terms of the planet's orbit and how close or how far they are from the sun and or from Earth, I mean, from our perspective on Earth versus where they typically are in the solar system. I don't know.
More like visual
Yes, thank you.
than energetic.
That's exactly what I'm trying to say. More visual than it is energetic.
Yeah.
I am not aware of any astrological significance to that. That was actually a surprise to me when I read it. But cool to look at, cool to see it.
Yeah, definitely. I was curious because I kept hearing about that because I like to follow the astronomy side of things. I love that. But yeah, I hadn't really seen a whole lot come through. So I was wondering, like, is there anything or people just not talking about it yet? That kind of thing.
Yeah,
So.
from an energetic shift level, I'm not aware of anything more significant. I mean, that being said, once we get to more Aquarius season, so once we get like Wednesday of next week, I think we're all going to start to feel some of the shift that you're already kind of feeling. We're going to start to feel that because, I mean, truthfully, again, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This last full moon that we had on Monday, we're right now in the middle of a Sun-Mars opposition. So January had a lot of that kind of Mars type of energy coming in, and Mars can be a tough planet. It can be known for aggression and frustration and stress and conflict and confrontation even. And we've had a lot of kind of agitations with Mars in the month of January. So as we move closer to the end of January, we're going to move away from all of that and into some more optimistic feelings. And things are going to start to feel lighter. We need that.
Amazing. Yeah, so many people just like out there going, what is wrong with me? Why do I feel this way? And I know we talked about this in the last episode, but we just had the new year. And astrologically, January 1st is not the beginning of a year. This is winter season, right?
No.
This is go inward. This is hibernate
Yeah.
and be still and quiet and reflect. And I think as you're talking about it with all this Mars retrograde and all of this other, like I don't know that I've talked to anybody that isn't feeling it. Like if they're not feeling that conflict outwardly with people, they're feeling it inwardly. Like, why don't I want to do this? Why do I want to do this? What's wrong with me? Why don't I have motivation? Why, just so much of that going on. So be gentle with yourselves. It's
Yes.
legit right
And
now.
change is coming. Yeah, change is coming and nothing to fear. There's no fear in that. But so is optimism. Optimism's coming and I do promise you that things will start to feel lighter as we continue to progress into 2025. So it won't be like this forever. I mean, that's some good news because, yeah, it can be real tough right now, but things will get better.
Mhm.
And I know you've said this before, but it's so important. We cannot underestimate. But sometimes when things feel really heavy and hard, number one, it's not forever. But number two, it is such an important time to be very disciplined on self care.
Mhm.
And especially with this Mars energy, anyone who has Mars really prevalent in their chart, got to get that energy out. Like we got to get that frustration out. So physical movement is the best way to do that. But maybe that's not for you. Maybe it's journaling. Maybe it's talking to a friend, a therapist. Like we need to process this and not just hold it in our bodies. It's just so, so important.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. When you did my reading for me, I loved that so much about the reading that you were very specific with, okay, this is what's going on, but what are the tangible
Mhm.
self-care day-to-day things that you can do right now? I felt like that was so grounded and helpful. And I love all the astrological terminology and learning about the plants, but it can get very like head spinny and swirly. And for you to be able to ground that and be like, and this is what you need to take away, and this is what you need to do. And one of those things was like move your body. I actually just did a reel today about moving your body because I'm talking to myself and reminding myself at the same
Yeah.
time. Um, but while we're moving into Aquarius season, maybe we can just end with what are some of the specific self-care callings for Aquarius season?
So Aquarius season is all about getting back to our social lives. You know, Capricorn season's about planning and organizing and, getting ourselves ready for the long term and our goals and our successes for the long term. Aquarius season is a shift to our social natures, connecting with friends again, connecting with our network. Maybe that's a work network versus closer friends, but leaning into our social selves, leaning into our support systems, wherever that is. So, those dinner dates, the lunch dates, going shopping, just kind of let's remember that we are part of other people too. We are interdependent species here. So I would say number one, connect with your social life again. Number two, think about the collective. Aquarius season is all about the collective. And, what are we doing today that impacts the collective? Maybe that's for you, might translate to a service project, or what can we be doing to kind of make the world a little bit of a better place? That's Aquarius for you. Um, Small acts of kindness. That's always a great thing to lean into as well. So, and then the third thing is, as we do those other two things, let's remember who we are and allow our inner selves to shine. So that's another, key Aquarius trait is how do I show up amongst the collective as still an individual? Let your rebel shine. Whatever it is that, you really love to do that you embrace that maybe it's not part of the norm that we're taught, it's not part of our society. This is the time to let it shine. It's so funny when I have readings with anyone who has strong Aquarius in their charts, you can usually tell right away. They will show up with like really funky glasses. Like Aquariuses love funky glasses. Just little things that you can do to really help yourself stand out. Lean into that, embrace that, showcase that.
Mhm.
This is the time to do it. So,
I love that. I am really, really trying to be keenly aware of where I dim that funkiness down and where it's always been there. And I'm going to tell a quick story. I know we're a little bit over time, but over Christmas, and I will post it. I haven't posted it yet, but I took a picture because I have this leopard. It's like a very tight fitting, but very comfortable leopard turtleneck that I call my Jersey Shore shirt, but I love it. Like it's very flashy, but I love it. It's super comfortable. Like it looks really good on me. And it was Christmas time, so I wanted to wear my leopard, and I put on this red and black plaid, what is that, buffalo plaid headband. And I looked at myself and I heard myself go, "Oh, that's too much." But I recently had a psychic reading, and that was like the major theme was like you constantly tell yourself you're too much. And so it stuck. Like that piece of the reading stuck in my head, and I am constantly aware of how often that voice in my head is like, "Oh, that's too much. That's too much. That's too much." And I looked at it and I was like, I actually really like that. I'm just going to wear it. I'm going to let myself be too much. That's kind of my theme for the year
Good.
is to let myself be too much. And then I was remembering a memory that I had when I mean, I could not have been older than like 4 years old, maybe five. But I remember that I like put my own outfit together. And I remember again, it's funny because it was like two different, it was like a plaid and a stripes. Actually, the skirt was plaid and the shirt was stripes. And I remember this, I was four. And I thought that it was like the most amazing outfit. Like I felt so good in it. And I remember, I think I wanted to impress my older sister. She's 6 years older than me. But instead of impressing her, she looked at it and she said, Kelly, that clashes. And it broke my damn heart. It broke my little 4-year-old heart that I didn't impress somebody with my like funky style. And so I
Yeah.
think that was maybe not the moment, but it was a significant moment when I learned like, oh, that's too much, or I need to know like what are the quote rules about fashion and how I put together things. But if I'm really honest with myself, I've always wanted to be a rule breaker. Like I've always loved black and brown together. And I remember in high school, somebody told me you can't wear black and brown together. Of course, now that's like not a thing. But I remember back in the day being like, I don't understand. Why they look so good together. Like, why would you not be able to put black and brown together? So anyway, that's just a fun example of my Aquarian nature, that like that funkiness that I mean, I very, very, very much dimmed down. At least as far as like how I physically present myself, the way I talk, I don't think I dim down too much anymore, although maybe a little bit. So
I
just a fun
love that is
example.
such a perfect, beautiful example of that Aquarius nature. And this is a season to let it fly. I mean, show everyone what you have. I mean, this is a season to do it. You know, no apologies. I love it. That is such a great example. Love
Yeah,
it.
thank you. And I wanted to add one more thing because we were talking about Aquarius energy, which I know so well. And that is the rebellion piece of it. When I learned about like Aquarian energy, and I am such a rebel. And one of the things I have to be very cautious of is being a rebel with a cause and not just being a rebel just to like be a pain in the
Yeah.
butt.
Yeah. Yeah. Just to disturb the peace for the sake of
Just to
disturbing the
be a
peace.
jerk and make things
Yeah.
harder for people.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's fun. Thank you so much, Marci. Is there anything that you have left that you want to add? I feel like we've covered so much, and I,
Time of
I know
year.
this is going to be incredibly helpful for people. Like just knowing the gigantic transition that we have been in and that we're moving into throughout this year, and like as you're describing all these planets kind of moving in and out, it's like it's such a huge transition, but it sounds like it's going to be very wobbly too. Like
Yeah.
it's not going
Yeah.
to be this like perfect crescendo of like, oh, here it comes. It's going
Yeah.
to be in and out of all these signs and a lot of shifts and transitions. And I would imagine that's going to feel pretty confusing.
Yeah.
So I think people knowing that what we're going into is beautiful. And I would like to end with if you have anything you would like to say about people, I don't even know how to ask this question appropriately. I so think that we can use this information to better understand ourselves, but I do think there can be a tendency to feel like a victim, like kind of get into that poor me. Do you have any like thoughts on that or advice for people to kind of navigate that so that it's not like, well, I'm this or I'm going through this, so poor me. I don't know. I feel like it can be sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy
Mm.
also if people worry too much about what's coming. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And so I think what you're saying is, when you hear some of this astrology or you're validated with some of the astrology, that people can take it just to almost use it as um, like a permission slip, if
I
you will.
mean,
Is that?
I think, and as I'm talking about it, I'm like, okay, I'm not asking this in the right way. But I think that the thing that I worry about, because I do believe we are powerful manifestors, and I always do this dance with astrology. It's like if we're in fear and we're in worry, we can actually amplify and make these transitions harder than they need to be.
Yeah.
So I guess I just wanted to talk about like any advice that you have to navigate that, to be cautious of, knowing that this may not be easy. And like, I just went through my Uranus opposition, like we talked about in the last one. It wasn't easy. And I'm not saying like, don't be real with it and like talk about it and love on yourself and know that it's challenging. But I do sometimes see people sort of latch onto things and then get in a fear cycle with it. And I feel like that can very easily tip into amplifying and making things harder and worse than it needs to be.
Yeah. But I also feel like that's exactly where astrology can be so powerful and enlightening. And empowering is what I mean to say, because yes, you can have the awareness of, what energies you're working with, but that can also be empowering to say, okay, this is the time for X. This is where I need to be leaning into. Because by working like with an astrologer who can give you not only what the energy is that you're working with, but for you specifically, what is the message that the universe is trying to show you, or what's the lesson that the universe is trying to show you? So if you continue to approach issues and problems that bubble up in your life with kind of like a fear-based mentality or another why me mentality, I don't know, for me, at least for me personally, it feels so empowering to say, when things start to happen to me, I can say, yeah, I expected this. I had a feeling this might happen. It makes it less personable in that way, because just for my own personal example, this week, I've had probably 4 different instances of people coming to me and they were mad and angry and whatever the issue is, and they're flying off these emails and they're so upset. And if I didn't have this insight, there's definitely a part of me that would have been like, oh my gosh, this hurts, like whatever. But I have this insight. I know what the energy is feeling. So there's a big part of me that's like, oh, this makes sense, And what's empowering about that is I don't take it personal. I know the energy that they're dealing with. So it absolutely helps inform me on how I'm going to respond. So let's say even, we try our best every day. We try our best as humans, but sometimes those things still get to us when people...
They sting.
Yeah, exactly. They sting. I know enough about this time period. I know enough about this energy that yes, it stings, but I need to wait on this. I am not going to respond today. I'm going to respond tomorrow after I've had a good night's sleep and, a full glass of water, whatever that is. But to me, that's exactly where the empowerment comes in, because I know what the energy is. I know it's not a personal attack on me necessarily. And it just puts me in a better place to help me respond to what's being thrown at me, versus the opposite of just like, where is this coming from? Everybody hates me, like that victim type of mindset that we can very easily slip into. So
Definitely.
Does that answer? I hope that answers.
I think you answered that beautifully. And I think I asked you a very like weird, not nonsensical question. So good job with that, Marci. I'm actually very impressed. Awesome. Thank you so much. This is just, it's easy to talk with you. I'm sure we'll have you back on to keep us up to date on what's happening. And I just know that this is personally so helpful for me. And I have sent this podcast to several of my clients and I'm like, it's not you, it's the universe. Learn what you can, take care of yourself. And we just navigate it. But I do feel that we are on the edge of some major shifts. And I feel in my soul and in my deepest part of my being that ultimately this is going to be the shift that we've all been praying for, even if it's rocky on the way there.
Yeah, so. Exactly. So good things are coming for sure.